Look, I started drawing from a really young age. I've never stopped. Over time, I became really interested in street art. A lot of street art contains different words, like graffiti and things like that. I thought, well, what about Auslan as well? So I thought I would focus on signing as a way to express myself in my first language. And, that really resonated with me. And people started to like it and they wanted to see more of it. And it became really quite popular.
Have you ever done street art illegally and the cops have come to get you, but you didn't notice because they couldn't communicate to you?
Yeah, so usually if cops come along and they can't talk to me, they kind of freak out. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but they can't, I just sign to them and they just kind of like, oh, I can't handle it. And then they just leave.
I've used my wheelchair to get out of speeding tickets before too.
Oh, look, I had a really terrible experience maybe they won't be happy to see this interview.
I'm Angus. Can you please give me a sign name?
No, you can't ask for a sign name.
I can't ask for one. Oh.
So people often will ask me, you need time because I need to get used to who you are and find out a little bit more about you. And then later on, something might resonate.
You're not worthy yet, Gus. Sorry,
Maybe
mate.
at the end of this podcast, I might get one.
He's not worthy.
Well, let's hope. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Listenable podcast. Today, we are with an incredible guest who joins us from about an hour and 20 minutes down the V-Line train in Geelong. His name is Jaycob, affectionately known as Gonketa, the artist, and we are also speaking to him as deaf through Auslan.
G'day, how you going? Thanks for having me here. I didn't realise it's actually more like an hour 30 to get here, but it goes really fast because I can just draw while I'm on the train, so it's great.
Before we came on, you were, I know how to spell my name. I've been speaking a little bit of Auslan, but you talked about my sign name. Can you explain what that is? And you actually gave me one, which is the first time I've ever got one, which is cool.
Yeah, so I did just give you a new sign name, which is the same sign for tennis. Obviously, it's quite fitting being a tennis player yourself.
Oh, serve in tennis.
What about now that I'm a washed up tennis player? Does that mean I have to change my sign name or can I still have the tennis one?
Well, I believe you've been playing tennis for a long time, so it's quite a fitting sign name. And sometimes you do just get stuck with a sign name and it can be hard to change it. In the deaf community, it's somewhat seen as illegal to change your sign name.
Can I say I don't want to change my sign name? I like it, mate. And I'm going to use you as my authority. All right. So if people ask me, I'll say Jaycob, a.k.a. Gonketa gave it to me, which I like.
Jaycob, your sign, I hope I don't get this wrong, but your sign name is close?
Or almost. So it's like this, Jaycob. And yeah, it's because I'm quite tall.
I'm Angus. Can you please give me a sign name?
No, you can't
one.
ask for a sign name.
I can't ask for one.
I don't think you can ask. Yeah, you can't ask for a sign name. You got to get given one.
Yeah, people often ask me to give them a sign name, but you need time to get to know the person really well. If you're patient, you might be lucky enough to get one. Some people never get one, like myself. I didn't get one till I was about 17 years old. Obviously, I'd been involved in the deaf community for a long time, but it wasn't until I was 17 that I got given one and now it's stuck. I've tried to get rid of it a few times, but no, it's with me for life.
You're not worthy yet, Gus. Sorry,
Maybe
mate.
at the end of this podcast, I might get one.
He's not worthy.
Well, let's hope.
Hey, maybe.
Maybe. I like that. That's good.
Jaycob, you're an incredible artist, and as a deaf artist, a lot of your work interprets sign. Has that always been the case, or has that been something that you recently recognized as a way to identify your work?
Well, I started drawing from a really young age, and I just never stopped drawing. I always had the goal in mind of wanting to become an artist. But for a long time, I found it difficult. People weren't interested in my work, or I didn't really know how to get involved. I tried to sell some of my pieces, but people weren't buying them. So finally, when I found my passion for street art, I started to notice that a lot of street artists use English wording in their art. And so I thought to myself, why not use Auslan? So I decided to give it a go and express myself through my art in my first language, Auslan. And it was a hit. People started to become really interested in my work. They wanted to see more and more. It became quite popular. And I loved it, so I've just been doing it ever since. I think it's perfect and it really suits well with my other job, which is as an Auslan teacher. It means I get heaps of ideas and inspiration from my other job that I can use in my artwork. I really love it.
What first drew you to drawing and art? That was a pun, that was an accidental pun. What drew you to drawing? But was that a way because you communicate differently to the main portion of the population? Is that what you found at a young age to kind of express how you're feeling?
Yeah, I'm a very visual person. Obviously, I rely on what I can see and the visuals around me rather than what I can hear. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved watching cartoons on, ABC Kids or whatever it was. I always loved trying to copy and draw the cartoons as a kid. I would basically just draw my entire world. And that habit of mine never stopped. Obviously, I'm really drawn to visuals and visual communication. English is not my first language, and so it's not something that I like to focus on. Anything visual, to me, is connected to language and communication.
Going back, you said that you loved to draw as a child. In school for you, did your art teachers lean into accessibility and your disability to help with your expression, or did they find it difficult and lean away from it?
Well, I went to a deaf school actually, the Victorian College of the Deaf, or VCD. You may know the school on St Kilda Road. But at the time, unfortunately, there wasn't a great art teacher at the school. So I actually didn't really enjoy art as a subject in school because of the teacher. They actually made me really hate art for a while. It was really more just like playful style of art, like, collage and things. And it just wasn't something that I was interested in. I've never really been into collage and playful forms of art like that. Unfortunately, the teacher was quite an angry person too, so it just wasn't the right environment. I then moved to a mainstream high school, which had a hearing teacher and Auslan interpreters in the classroom, and they were a huge supporter of my work. They led me away from drawing and to start my interest in painting, and I was fortunate to have Auslan interpreters there. Unfortunately, the quality of interpreting wasn't always great, but I did have access.
What's been your response from the deaf community around your work? Because I know as someone who has a disability, who's in the public eye, not everybody agrees with what I say, and fair enough, because they've got their own lived experience. Has it been overwhelming support, or do you kind of feel like it's sometimes different from different people?
Well, deaf people can read my artwork better than people in the hearing community can. Auslan users are able to read into my work and engage with me on what it might be about. Some community members might provide me with some suggestions and edits, and sometimes I actually go out to the community and ask them for feedback. I like to gauge whether the community are understanding the messages I'm trying to portray, and sometimes I like to deliberately make it hard to read. I'm also really interested in the use of hand shapes in my art. And look, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use it here on screen, but this middle finger hand shape is quite commonly used in the deaf community, and it's not considered a rude gesture or hand shape. There are heaps of signs or words in Auslan that use this hand shape. But a lot of people that don't know Auslan automatically think it's rude. I try to educate people through my artwork about Auslan and the fact that hand shapes like that aren't rude in the deaf community.
Speaking of interpretation, how do you, and I always find this a personally interesting question, as somebody who is deaf, how do you interpret music?
Well, I personally use hearing aids. Look, I can't talk for everyone, just my personal experience, but I wear hearing aids. And I can use those to access music, but I can't hear any words when I'm listening to music. It all comes out a bit blurred or muffled to me, so basically I can hear the drum line mostly. To be honest, I really only use my hearing aids to access music. They're actually turned off right now, so I don't use them for everyday access. I'm not interested in hearing people talk or background noise or train or tram noise. I'm really only interested in using my hearing aids to access music. So that's just my personal experience. There are some other deaf people out there that might be similar to me. Some deaf people can hear more than I can, and some people prefer to only feel the vibration of music. So everyone's different.
A lot of people hate my voice, so you're actually winning by not being able to hear my voice at the moment, which is good. And there's also hammering going on outside our studio, so there's plenty going on. Around your art, have you always been proud of? Yeah, Deaf Gain, definitely. Do you find your art has helped you become proud of your disability, or what was that journey like for you throughout the whole, growing up into the man that you am today?
It's an interesting question. Well, it took me years to really find my identity. But I don't think that started from my art. It actually started back at the deaf school I attended. Because I had a deaf classroom, deaf classmates, I was in that environment. Some of my friends had deaf families and they would invite me into their homes. I was exposed to deaf culture and the deaf community, and it's really where I found my identity. My artwork is really where I share my identity. Yeah, so through my artwork, I'm able to share my identity with the world. I hope to share and hopefully educate a wider audience about my identity and the deaf community.
How did you go? Because you went to a deaf high school and then you went to the Victorian College of Arts, which is one of the biggest art schools in Australia, massive around the world. How'd you go when you went into a hearing school to learn art? Was there some barriers for you there?
Oh boy, unfortunately, I had a really bad experience at the VCA. I don't think they'd be happy to watch this interview. Well, my experience there was that they're not very deaf friendly. Their schedule is constantly changing all the time, which made it near impossible to book interpreters in advance and reschedule them. It was a mess. I took a year off and then I decided to quit. I didn't want to go back there. I just didn't feel it was the right thing for me.
Thanks for being vulnerable and saying that. We appreciate it. What could have they done better? Was it that your lived experience wasn't really getting listened to, or do you think the whole cultural setup of education institutions, because I also found this at uni sometimes, it wasn't really built for us and it just kind of kept chugging along without our input?
I felt like they just didn't want to meet me in the middle. I felt that I was the one having to meet them in the middle. I did try talking with the tutors and asking them to stick with one schedule for my sake and for interpreting booking's sake. I was constantly chasing up on preparation materials to give the interpreters prior to lectures just so that they can best prepare their translation. But unfortunately, they refused. They said that they couldn't. There was excuses that they constantly changed their lectures on the fly. They said that they couldn't stick to one schedule for whatever reason. It felt like it was a constant battle for a year, a whole year. And for all that effort, I felt there wasn't an educational benefit for me. I do thank one teacher I had there by the name of Richard. Unfortunately, I can't remember his last name, but he encouraged me to stick with and use more hands and gestures in my art. That was the one benefit that I gained from going to the VCA, and after that, I quit and just took off from there. I was invited to be part of the Fringe Festival. And they had amazing access. They provided Auslan interpreters and anything that I needed. It's such a shame that I had that negative experience at the VCA. But thankfully, my life's taken me on another path, and I'm happy that I avoided the VCA. Fringe Festival were amazing. They provided Auslan interpreters. It's part of their Navigate program, they call it. It included workshops and training, and I learnt far more than a university.
You use the language Auslan as you are today. Have you traveled overseas, and while abroad, how have you gone with different language overseas? As I would struggle going to Japan and not speaking Japanese, do you find the same hurdles in language using sign?
Well, I haven't personally travelled to Asia yet, so I can't speak about that experience. But I have travelled to Europe 3 times now, and I absolutely love it. Some countries are so visual and good at gestures. For example, in Italy, they might sign something like this, for example, and you know exactly what they mean. I was able to feel connected almost straight away. I could tell if someone was saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" or "That's delicious." So I loved Italy. There's also the benefit of being able to meet deaf people around the world because the deaf community is huge. There's so many deaf people worldwide. There is also what we call international sign. It's not called international sign language because it's not, in fact, a language. It's more of an international sign system where signs from many different sign languages have been pulled together and agreed upon. For example, I recall sitting around a table with a heap of different deaf people, all from different countries like Germany, Italy, Hungary, England, Australia. We all sat around this table and there were no barriers. We were all able to communicate in one sign system, even though we were all from different countries and used different languages.
Now, I don't want to generalize, but the art world in years past could have been a bit snobbish, right? It's not the most accessible industry. How do they view you as a deaf artist? Have you had any problems now that you are killing it in what you're doing and making a living out of it? What's their response been, and how inclusive have they been of you?
I still don't feel included. It has been a bit hard. Again, I need Auslan interpreters with me if I go to an exhibition, for example. And I always end up just chatting with the interpreters, and I really want to be talking with the other people at the exhibition. I'm always nervous about approaching other people for a chat, but no one ever thinks to approach me. And if there isn't an interpreter available, I end up just walking around on my own, checking out the artwork, and then leaving.
What about their response to your art? Not just the art you're looking at, but what you do. Yeah, the hearing art world. How does the hearing art world view your work? And do you feel like there's a changing of the tide where they're starting to take notice and want you to do more things?
From my perspective, I think the hearing community aren't too fazed by my work. I haven't been heavily involved in the hearing art community to date, but I am starting to be invited to a few different events, which is a good start. I'm headed in the right direction, but I can see that there's still a really long way to go.
I think it's like anything. You just need role models and greater representation to start, and then hopefully that gets the ball rolling for other artists as well. Do you feel a bit of pressure in that, in being one of the first, deaf artists to kind of crack it in the mainstream?
No, I wouldn't say I feel pressure, and I don't think I'm the first deaf artist. There have definitely been deaf artists that have paved the way before me. The deaf arts community in Australia is quite small, but there definitely have been other deaf artists come before me, but maybe not any that have become hugely successful and hit the big time.
Have you had other deaf artists reach out to you to talk about their experiences or to use you as a sounding board, excuse the language, to talk about experience and share ways to navigate this art world?
I only know a few older deaf artists and I'm not really in contact with them a lot. I do have some friends that are also artists at a similar age to me, and so I'm always in contact with them asking them for advice. But at the moment, my focus is on really trying to encourage the younger generation of deaf youth to get into art. Because when I was younger, I didn't have any role models.
I was going to say, what's your advice then? We have a lot of young people listening. Obviously, it's captioned, and we're going to have the Auslan in there so they can say, what's your advice on a young person who is deaf or disability in general? Because I know you went through some tough times, as did I, so they can get out there and be the people they want to be.
Just be yourself, I think. Show your work to people and don't be frightened of it. Put yourself out there.
From a personal note, we've spoken a bit about Gonketa as an artist and will continue to do so. But on a personal note, friendships growing up, did you have or do you have hearing friends? And did they learn Auslan to be able to create the conversation that you speak in your language?
Well, I've taught many people Auslan throughout my life. There's always plenty of people that come and go in life. We might establish a friendship, I teach them Auslan, and then it might fizzle. It might be because they find it too much effort to communicate with me. They might not like signing or find it tiring. I'm not sure. But I do have a few hearing friends that are still my friends to this day. Maybe not quite like they were before, though. So as I said, sometimes I do build relationships with people, but then unfortunately the relationships fizzle for whatever reason.
Do you find then that having your language as Auslan, it is more difficult to make genuine friends for life rather than what you have maybe experienced watching, hearing people in schoolyards or working environments?
Unfortunately, I don't talk to or see any of the hearing friends I had from my school days. But I am still friends with all my deaf friends that I went to school with to this day. These are really long-standing friendships and I still see these friends and catch up with them regularly. I'm sure they'll be lifelong friends, but unfortunately I don't see any of my hearing school friends anymore. It's interesting.
I'm going to level with you. I've done a shit job of learning Auslan. It's one of my next goals and I should have done better and I want to do better. I also learned Japanese and French at school and I have never used it once, right? And I'm starting to see that Auslan is slowly starting to get offered at schools, mainstream schools. How does that make you feel? And what's advice to, governments and educators who make these decisions about the importance of giving that option?
I absolutely agree with you. Look, I think other languages in schools can be somewhat beneficial, but you're right, sometimes you never use them. So you wonder what the point was. But learning Auslan means the world will be more accessible not only for the deaf community, but for a range of people with other disabilities too. It's all about access. So yeah, absolutely, I would encourage as many people as possible to learn Auslan. Absolutely.
There's some awesome apps out there, in all seriousness. We'll put them in the show notes where I know my team at my consulting firm and the Dylan Alcohol Foundation are learning it. So anybody listening, there are some resources now online where you can actually do it. So make sure we'll put them in the show notes. I don't want to stuff them up so people can check them out.
Question for you, Jaycob. Going back to relationships, do you think that you could have a partner, as in a life partner, with somebody who didn't speak Auslan or wasn't willing to learn?
No way. There's no way.
Well, I do have a partner. We've been together for 8 years. And when we met, they knew no Auslan at all. So early on, we would communicate by writing messages on our phones back and forth to one another. But I really got sick of having to have my phone out all the time. So I started teaching them Auslan, and it's been wonderful. So yeah, my partner knowing Auslan is a must for me. And if they didn't, unfortunately, I think that would be it.
Do you think you could marry someone who spoke Mandarin or Spanish and you did not speak anything to each other?
No.
What kind of question is that? What do you reckon?
Okay. If I can be cheeky, is there any, and I'm not saying about you personally, but is there dirty talk in Auslan in a relationship?
Oh, there can be. Yeah, for sure.
A little cheeky silent. That was very good.
Thank you.
Okay, I was going to ask this as well. If you get commissioned to do art for someone you don't like, or the client has been a bit hard to deal with, do you put secret like sign meanings or little Easter eggs of that person in your art and they have no idea, but maybe the deaf community would know? Have you done that, or do you do little secret messages?
Yeah, absolutely right, Dylan. I have done that, but my lips are sealed. I won't say who it was for.
Give me some. Stop, give me some. Give me a little. Come on.
No, I won't
I love
say.
that. Maybe off microphone when we have a beer. All right.
All right.
All right. I have some quick fire questions. First one, have you ever, or do you forget that you've put something in the microwave?
Many times, yes.
Right. Next one, what's an alarm clock for you?
I actually got a new one recently. It's brilliant. I bought it through the NDIS. I actually always wake up on time now. I used to have to rely on my mum waking me up or ask my partner to wake me up. And now I've just got this vibrating alarm under my pillow that vibrates to wake me up, and it's amazing. I almost hit the roof when it goes off in the morning.
Whoa, that's cool. Wait, so it vibrates under your pillow on your head?
Sorry, I mean under my mattress, not under my pillow. I used to put my phone under my pillow, but I used to just sleep through it all the time. So this one's way better.
I reckon some people might use that vibrating mattress for other reasons.
Okay. Cheeky. Another quick fire question is fire alarms. Is there a way for the deaf or hard of hearing community to be addressed when there is an emergency?
Yeah, so we usually have flashing light alarms, but I don't actually have any in my home. I live on the edge.
You can see and smell it.
Live life on the edge.
Yeah, you can see and smell it. Live on the edge.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's funny.
Bowl?
Yeah, you go first.
It's time for the bowl of uncomfortable. This is a question that we ask every guest. It's a question sent to us by listeners that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable asking you in person without meeting you first. I'll go first. Mike, who is 11 years old, said, would you prefer to be blind or deaf, and why?
Well, deaf, obviously. One of the biggest benefits of being deaf is having sign language. I feel very fortunate that Auslan is my first language. And like I said before, when I travelled to Europe, there are deaf people from all over the world that use different sign languages, and it is fascinating to learn all about their languages and different signs from around the world. I just love it. So I love being deaf because of sign language.
A follow-up question from me to that is, and this is obviously a hypothetical, but and more around just your expression. How would you express your art if you were blind, or do you think that you would still be an artist?
Well, potentially, there are some amazing deaf-blind artists around the world. So yeah, possibly.
Do you know why you're on this podcast? Not just because you're deaf. It's because you're an effing good artist, to be honest, mate. And I really hope that, especially the art community, give you your, what is it? Give you your roses? Is that the saying?
Oh.
Did I make that up?
Oh, like at the end of a play?
Yeah, like you deserve it, mate, because you're good. Where do you want to take this? Right? How wide do you want to go? And I guess what's the dream for you when you look back, hopefully on a career in, 30 years of where you're at?
Well, my dream is to paint as many walls and murals around the world with sign language as possible. And that's in the hope that it'll educate people to learn to sign more.
Got one more small question. I just thought of one. Have you ever done street art illegally and the cops have come to get you, but you didn't notice because they couldn't communicate to you?
Yeah, I usually use what we call the deaf card in that situation. I just sign around and gesture and move my hands to confuse them. But I haven't been caught to date. But I'd probably just purposely try to not be able to communicate with them. Probably shouldn't say this on here.
Oh my man. Hey, I've used my wheelchair to get out of speeding tickets before too. All right. So you guys got some benefits.
Well, Jaycob, a.k.a. Gonketa, we're going to have all of the links to your art where people can see it, where they can purchase it, where they can find out what you're doing next in our show notes, which are below, where people click play on this podcast, or if they're watching this on YouTube with captions and our interpreter. Thank you so much for your time today. We genuinely appreciate you making the hour 30 trip, and hopefully we can make it down there to have a beer with you in Geelong soon.
Oh, no worries at all. Thank you so much for having me. And absolutely, you're welcome down my way anytime.
Thanks, mate. Legend.